Aurora's Get Tough approach to homelessness is extending from how tax dollars are used to what people do with their own private funds. Newly released body camera video of the Lodo police shooting tells a different story than what Denver police have been saying. Facts? Who needs them? Well, Denver voters for one, and they're not always getting facts from the city's official voting guide. A deadline comes and goes with no action on conserving water in the West. And after the worst of the worst fires in Colorado, hope.
It's exciting to see the first step, sort of like the first flowers of spring, I think.
Encouragement, accountability, honesty. Let's do a little of all three on Next. Aurora's crackdown on people who don't have homes is headed to another level. The new conservative majority on city council is moving beyond just determining how tax dollars are spent on homelessness. Now they're considering a campaign to discourage private citizens from giving their own money to people on the streets. Here's Steve Staker.
Aurora City Councilman Steve Sundberg says he's been paying a lot of attention to this off-ramp near his home, 225 at Iliff. He says he's seen the same folks here living and panhandling for the last 3 years.
Well, we've seen 2 of them overdose on heroin, and we would just love to see them become healthy in the long term, and that's not healthy.
So Sundberg has proposed a city-funded campaign to put up signs encouraging people not to give to panhandlers and give to a fund for service providers instead.
We would like to educate them that it's better to give to the organizations that support those in need rather than giving to the panhandler directly. Because in a lot of cases, it just exacerbates a cycle of dependency that is clearly not healthy.
He admits he doesn't have the data to back up this claim.
Well, we just see it with our own eyes, right? I don't know what the empirical data suggests, but we don't want to be a city that is permissive to open-air drug markets, permissive to open camping, and permissive to aggressive panhandling. We'll leave that to the cities on the West Coast.
Individuals can make that decision for themselves.
Kathy Alderman with Colorado Coalition for the Homeless says data she's seen from research in California and Canada seem to show that if you give someone money, they won't necessarily use it destructively.
Well, the research shows that when you give people a basic income or you give people what they need to survive, they spend it on those things that help them survive.
Alderman says she worries this campaign would be the first step to criminalizing panhandling. Sundberg insists that's not the goal, and people still have the choice.
They can still give if they want to, but they should really know that in a lot of cases they're just contributing to a cycle of dependency and addiction.
People need to have the choice to decide whether they want to give to individuals or they want to give to organizations, and I don't think the government has a role in that.
The one thing it seems that everyone is on board with here is that there is an inherent public safety risk to people standing in the street and panhandling. Members of Aurora City Council have asked for data on that before they make any final decision about this proposal. This would cost about $400 per sign in Aurora, according to a presentation from last night. No estimate yet on how many signs they might need, how many of these places they might put a sign where they expect people might be panhandling more often than not.
So that's the thought. The thought is like, here's a corner where people stand. So they're going to put a sign like right next to where those people stand saying, don't give to this person.
Yeah, I mean, think of like a do not enter sign.
Yeah.
It would be a sign on a sign pole just like that. And the thought is that those are probably going to get vandalized pretty quickly if people are encouraging you not to give and you've got people there who would like you to give.
Bad for business.
They're anticipating that they're going to have to spend a bit more than they do on normal street signs on fixing these when they finally do put them in place.
Homelessness is certainly a key focus of Aurora City Council, so we'll keep watching this and other issues. Thank you, Steve. Aurora City Council certainly has been busy. Last night, the council rejected the idea of acknowledging that the city of Aurora was established on Native American lands. Now, if you know anything about Aurora's new conservative majority city council, you might be expecting that this came with a robust defense of white people. But this actually got a bit more biblical.
The only way that I will support this is if we also acknowledge that this is actually God's country. So if that's one of the 48 also in recognition here, that's the only way I'm going to in any way, shape, or form before this.
So this is our way of simply acknowledging that the land that we live and work on was originally stewarded by individuals centuries and centuries ago, and that we want to pay homage to that history as American history.
Mayor.
Councilmember Jones.
Centuries and centuries ago, that's God.
Conservative Councilwoman Danielle Drinsky was not done at that point. The Native American land acknowledgement, that was toast. But Drinsky then lit into the very idea of Aurora having an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This in Colorado's most diverse city.
We have 2 currently staffed and 1 vacancy for a total of 3 positions.
Thank you. I am adamantly against this. And if we have an entire department working on things like this, like I said, unless we're going to acknowledge this is God's country, I can't even believe this is coming to City Council tonight.
Councilwoman Allison Coombs, who's on the far left end of the political spectrum, noted in response to Councilwoman Drinsky that the year is 2022. She said flying off the handle over a diversity office she found to be shocking and disappointing. Denver's Democratic District Attorney Beth McCann has reviewed the videos of a police shooting in Lodo, and she has determined that a grand jury should review the videos of the police shooting in Lodo. DA McCann will leave it up to those grand jurors on whether to indict police officers who shot at 1 man and injured 6 other people in the process. The DA's office says it is the first time that they have ever sent a police shooting to a grand jury instead of making their own decision. For weeks now, we have heard police describe what happened that night. Tonight, we see the body camera video, and it tells a slightly different story. A warning, we are about to show you this video up until the moment when police shot a man named Jordan Waddy. Shot him and injured 6 other people. That is one view, giving us a look at the moment when police shot Waddy. All of this obviously happens in a split second. We have the ability to slow it down and show it to you from another viewpoint, something that officers obviously can't do in the moment. So you have several officers with their guns drawn. You can see that Waddy pulls out his gun like by the muzzle and tosses it aside toward the sidewalk. He raises his hands right before police open fire. Police have always said that Waddy pointed the gun at them. It does not appear from the videos we've seen that he has his hand on the grip or the trigger, but again, they got a split-second look at this thing as it happened. There's a second view that shows an officer pointing his gun down a busy sidewalk. That police shooting injured 6 bystanders outside of Larimer Beer Hall. Police acknowledged for the first time today that their officers were responsible for the injuries in the crowd. Waddy's lawyer says that his client was in a surrender position when police fired. He said it was a miracle that Waddy survived. Nearby states currently putting up bounties for abortion providers and those who help them is having a financial impact in Colorado. The abortion fund director, Amanda Carlson at the reproductive rights group Cobalt, tells us that some other support networks for people seeking abortions in other states have decided to pause their efforts, knowing that Texas and Oklahoma are now offering financial incentives for people who hunt down abortion providers and support groups. The Cobalt Abortion Fund spent $200,000 on procedure funding in 2021. They've spent more than that just so far this year, $210,000 as of July. Then there's their spending on travel and hotel rooms. Cobalt spent $6,000 all of last year, compared to $115,000 so far this year. Cobalt says 2/3 of clients who have needed help paying for travel have come from Texas. Last year, Cobalt helped 34 patients with travel expenses. This year, so far, 371. Facts matter when it comes time to vote, because otherwise you might spend your time worried about things like Bigfoot attacks and election rigging. Last year, we discovered the city of Denver's ballot information is not necessarily factual. After the attention we put on the issue, politics guy Marshall Zellinger found out a fix is in the works.
Denver's ballot information Blue Book is not vetted for truth. We found that out last year when Denver's Blue Book included this reason to vote against ballot issue 2C. 2C, which passed, allowed the city to borrow money to pay for transportation needs, including bike lanes. Back to the comments. This paragraph explaining why you should vote no was provided by a Denver voter. She wrote, "A recent study shows that 0.02% of the traveling public uses bike lanes on South Broadway." The study was really a 2-hour observation on one day by the head of Colorado's Automobile Dealers Association. The voter, whose paragraph was printed for all Denver voters to see, told me, "It didn't ask you for facts, it asks you for comments."
100% it should be accurate, which is one of the reasons I started working working on this effort.
Denver City Councilwoman Kendra Black is working to get voters truthful ballot information.
We need to be really careful about that and kind of avoid what happened in 2021.
Denver's Blue Book is different than the state Blue Book. The state mails an actual Blue Book to every voter about statewide ballot issues we'll all vote on. Nonpartisan state legislative staff work on multiple drafts, summarizing and analyzing what a statewide ballot issue will do if passed. It goes through more checks and balances than Denver, where someone can submit a comment fewer than 500 words and have it printed without vetting for facts.
In Denver, we don't have that kind of neutral legislative staff and that is dedicated to that.
And Denver still won't. But City Council will consider approving a new way to review pro and con statements in the future, with staff from the Clerk and Recorder's Office, the City Attorney's Office, and legislative staff with City Council.
The hope is that that will sort of ensure that only accurate things are printed.
I'm not quite clear if that triad would be able to edit content or simply summarize it to keep it within the limits. City and state law prevents public money from advocating for or against ballot issues. I'm still not clear if editing for accuracy indicates advocating. Kyle, one other ballot issue real quick that will be resolved this year, the numbering of ballot issues, nerdy thing. Last year, for instance, Initiative 300 was about increasing the city's pot tax. But if you did a web search to learn about Initiative 300, you might have found out info about the camping ban from 2019, which was also called Initiative 300. No more going back to the start. This year's first number, based on where we left off last year, will be 305. No more repeating until it gets to 399 and then back again.
Okay, all right, okay, that makes sense. Can we go back to that previous thing, though? So we're not sure whether Denver is going to have a voter guide that is factual or whether they will just condense people's random horse excrement into like a tighter paragraph?
So only because city funds can't be used to edit, I'm not clear right now if I said, like on the sidewalk issue, if I made something up about sidewalks, if that would get edited for clarity or for 500 words, or if it would get edited for accuracy. I got to go back and check on that.
What's that amazing quote that was in your story? They didn't ask for facts.
It asks for comments.
It asks for comments. Story of our lives. Western states ignore the federal government's deadline to come up with a water conservation plan. It's not clear the feds plan to do anything about that. Finally, enough rain here to put a dent in our drought and in a neighborhood leveled by the Marshall Fire.
I feel like every new home that goes up is going to take just a little bit of that pain away.
Signs of hope. Next. I turned off my next 2 lawn sprinkler sessions this morning. We're going to be good till like next Monday at my house. You might want to do the same. Another day of heavy rain led to flooding in, among other places, Broomfield. This is Midway Park, not far from 36 and Highway 287. New River there, if you're in the mood to canoe. Rain is a good thing, goes the country song. Meteorologist Chris Bianchi looks at the real benefits of all these recent downpours.
Wildfires, drought, climate change. Sure, Colorado weather news these days, it can be pretty grim.
All right, I'll be honest about it. Every time I come on camera to talk about Colorado weather the last couple of years, it feels like I've mostly got bad news. But tonight, I've got good news for you.
There's lots of good news to share. Finally, the wet start to August across the Denver area might have eliminated the drought altogether in a few areas. Now think about this. Broomfield saw about a quarter of its typical annual rainfall in about 3 hours this morning. Areas around the Marshall Fire saw more rain today alone than they saw in the 6 months leading up to last December's fire. The south and east sides of the metro area saw a bunch of rain as well. In fact, about 80% of the Denver area saw at least an inch of rain, and about half of it saw at least 2 inches of rain. And sure, all that rain led to some road closures and some disruptions. But we got all the rain this week without the problems of last week, when flooding closed I-70 and led to more than 24 rescues.
So there you go. Some actual good news from a Colorado meteorologist. This rain, it's going to really help out with our drought.
And we are continuing to see those scattered showers all across the state. Right now we have a live look over downtown Denver where we're at 70 degrees, winds coming in from the west-southwest at 11 miles per hour. Some light drizzle out there right now, but we do have an air quality alert that's been in place. It's now extended until 4 o'clock tomorrow, and this is going to be for the usual areas for those higher levels of ozone. In addition to that, I have some flood alerts for you. This darker green color is a flood watch in effect through the rest of the evening, and it actually looks like our flash flood warning and our flash flood watch have both been allowed to expire early. So that's good news there. But as we take a look at our HD Doppler radar, we're seeing some light showers push its way into the Denver metro area, but some other hot spots further west along the western portion of I-70. We're going to continue to watch for heavy rain there and stronger storms as you make your way toward the southeastern corner of the state.
Thank you, thank you, Lauren. Sorry, I'm going to call you Danielle Grant. The states of the Colorado River Basin appear to have called the federal government's bluff. Fed set a deadline today for states to share their plans on how they plan to make unprecedented cuts on water use. The Colorado River Basin states did not meet that deadline, and the feds don't seem to be doing much about it, at least not right away. The states were supposed to come up with a plan to use 15% less water and to stabilize Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Both those reservoirs are at record lows. The Bureau of Reclamation announced its own cutback plan today, but according to Luke Runyon, who covers water issues for public radio in Colorado, knows this stuff better than anybody, he says the reductions everybody's talking about are not new. They were already outlined in existing agreements. Jack Schmidt's an expert on the Colorado River and the fight over its water. He told us that an especially dry winter could really make things worse.
We're in a true emergency, my heavens. If you total all of the water stored in the reservoirs of the federal reservoirs of the Colorado River system, and you divide that stored water by our average use rate of the 21st century, we have less than 1.5 years of water stored in those reservoirs. We don't want to be that close to the edge.
Under the Tier 2 shortage declaration shared all the way back in 2007 and then in 2019, Arizona's water apportionment will be cut by 21%, Nevada's by 8%.
It really reminds us, as we like to say, we're Louisville strong.
Each home is a statement for the neighborhoods taken to the ground by the Marshall Fire. Next. It's been 7.5 months since the Marshall Fire destroyed more than 1,000 homes around Louisville and Superior. We've talked about how that rebuilding process has been slow. Yet now there are new homes in progress. Bright lumber stands out dotting burned neighborhoods. It looks like hope.
This is just across from Harper Lake, down the hill a little bit in the neighborhood right next to ours that was destroyed in the Marshall Fire. This is our neighborhood. We live right up the hill a little bit in one of the areas that was spared by the fire, but this is where I walk the dog. This is where I go for runs. This is a part of our life here. In January, this place looked like a war zone. It was burnt rubble, chimneys standing, not much else.
Well, and every time you'd see the rubble, it really did bring the trauma back.
As we got to the summer and as we started clearing things out, that's when you really felt like, okay, we can start to move forward again. And they have now started to actually start putting up some houses. Well, that is the first house to pop back up in the neighborhood.
I'd be talking to someone at the grocery store and they'd be like, did you see the house that went up? I was like, yeah, I know, I saw it.
It's exciting to see the first step, sort of like the first flowers of spring, I think. I've been looking for those little signs of hope ever since December 30th. And this, the first green coming back over the burnt areas, and this is another one of those big signs for us.
And I feel like every new home that goes up is going to take just a little bit of that pain away.
It's really good to see. The single best viewer comment of the year came in during tonight's program. Stick around for feedback next. Jeff Moore writes in tonight to say, how dare you joke about Bigfoot attacks? My great-grandpappy was attacked by Bigfoot in God's country. I believe you know it as Aurora.